Hello, beautiful people. You are listening to the Communal Table podcast, part of Food and Wine Pro. I'm your host, Kat Kinsman, and my guest today wears many, many hats. She is the co-host of the Carb Face podcast, which if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that right now. It'll just break you in all the right ways. She is the mother of a cat with terrible diarrhea. Yep. And she is the co-author of Appetites and a few books in progress that, she's writing with a co-author who, well, let's just get to it. Here is Laurie Woolever.
Hello.
Hi. You've had a hell of a year.
It has been a really intense year, yes.
Yeah.
I was Tony Bourdain's assistant for 9 years until his death last year in June.
Yeah, and we're coming up upon the 1 year mark of this, and you are working on a couple of co-authored books, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So before Tony died, we started working on a travel book, which was meant to be kind of a fun project, and I hope that people will still have fun with it when it comes out, but it has been a very different kind of project. We had really just gotten started on it when he died, so very fortunately for me, I have this wonderful blueprint of what he wanted. We sat down for an hour one day, or more than an hour, and just went through, and he was very clear with what he wanted out of it. So I have that conversation transcribed, and that's kind of my Bible for making this book come to life. But
and it's not your first book rodeo either with him, because you did Appetites, which is an exquisite cookbook.
Thank you.
Oh my God, I love the writing in it. I love the recipes. I love the photographs of the people involved in it. And it's messy. It's a hot, beautiful mess in all the right kind of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was that? How long did you work on that?
That was from start to finish a little under 2 years. And that was from, first starting to write and develop to publication and promotion. And that was a fantastic experience. Now, Tony and I had actually worked on a cookbook years and years ago together.
Oh, right. Did you tested and styled for that? Or?
For the Anthony Bourdain Layout Cookbook, I did the recipe editing, which meant taking the recipes from the kitchen cookbooks that the chefs were using and made them into home cook, format, working with the publisher, and then also did the testing, which I don't recommend, actually. I think
testing is horrifying.
Yeah, it's horrifying, but also I think it's important to have a fresh set of eyes and somebody who's completely outside the project actually do the testing. But I wasn't going to say no, I was in my mid-20s and needed the money and, and it was a great experience. But it just in terms of the best possible cookbook, I think if you can get an outside tester, I think that's probably the way to go. But as it turned out, I think that's a great book. I mean, the recipes were very solid because they were very well used and tested already, restaurant recipes, that just had to be sort of scaled and, written correctly. So I think that's a great book. But so that was my first time with Tony.
Okay, so you worked together on that because y'all had a long history because you did that and then there was some space in between and then you were assistant. And even while you were as assistant, you had to periodically reintroduce yourself.
Yes, yeah. I mean, our whole relationship was characterized by really not seeing each other in person very much, which I think I can only speak for myself, but I think it suited us both really well. I mean, him because he obviously was traveling so much as part of his job, and me because it allowed me just to focus on the work. And, I'm somebody who can sort of go down a rabbit hole of trying to interpret a look or a gesture or a tone of voice.
I wouldn't know what any of that is like.
So it really just kept it sort of clean. All of my insecurity and weirdness didn't really come into play as much. And so it really was just about the work. And I enjoyed every minute I got to spend with him. And it was, always fun and exciting to see him. But we didn't have a lot of day-to-day personal contact. And that was the case with back in 2002, 2003 with the Layout Cookbook as well. I mean, he already was traveling and had this life of a television host. So everything we did was by email. So, and I met with him a few times. And then I did a one-off with him. We went to Montana in 2007 to cook at an event. Like he used to do these sort of hybrid events.
Oh, yeah. What is that? There people go to Montana in particular and cook at. There's some event that a lot of chefs like. It's like a plum gig for.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. This was like the University of Montana homecoming weekend.
Oh, that's not it.
Yeah. This was, he was out there for 3 or 4 days. He had to cook an event. We had to go to a cocktail party. I think he had to do a lecture. And then the real reason I was there was to cook dinner in the home of like the football coach or something. And it was like this package that had been auctioned off for a huge sum of money that went to, I don't know, the university, the university, I guess. And so it was, dinner cooked in the home of the football coach by Anthony Bourdain. For 8 people or something.
Wow.
So it was this menu straight from the Leal Cookbook. And it was, it was a breeze in that it was only for 8 people. But it was in, a home kitchen, which was, beautifully appointed, but a home kitchen. And it was super fun and just this kind of a strange little one-off. And that was just because his assistant at the time, I think, was heavily pregnant and couldn't travel. So then we started working together in 2009. So yeah, we didn't, I'd say in the first couple of years, I saw him so little and my role was more limited than it ultimately became. And, and he met so many people in the course of his travels and his work that he, I was like just another kind of nondescript, like white chick with blonde hair.
You're very descript.
I don't know. I mean, he was not the first person to not remember me after having met me before. So there were, I think at least two events where I had to go up to him and be like, "Hi, I'm your assistant." Because I could see on his face that he was like, he kind of had put the shutters down. Yeah, either just like didn't know who I was or was just kind of like.
Watching him at events was always such an interesting thing. I would like hang back and you see how he's how he was reacting to the energy coming at him. And
it's a skill, really kind of trying to give people the experience that they're looking for because they're your fan, but also trying to keep a little something of yourself just to maintain your sanity.
I would see him at events like once once we actually established peace in our times, but I would see him at events and and I respect people's space and stuff. And I knew that, I remember he came into CNN when it was announced that he was going to be doing the show there. And I worked there at the time and they were doing a book giveaway. And like at CNN, famous people from all over the world would come in and nobody bats an eye. Kind of like, oh, cool, look who's here. People were lined up for an hour or more to have him sign it. And so it was, always witness that happening, gracious to everybody, all this stuff. But I would be at a party and I would just sort of watch him like, people coming up to him and I would think like, I'm not going to steal his energy. I'm not going to do it. And every single time he'd sort of sidle up and be like, you weren't going to talk to me? And I would feel like the prettiest girl in the room because like he chose to come over and say hi. And then, and then it was great because we have very like directly focused conversations and I sort of tried to give him the emotional space to be like, okay, it's safe here. I don't need anything from you. We can just be humans. And it was really nice. It was sort of a nice thing, but maybe he did that with absolutely everyone. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think I don't think it was so common that people would sort of think that way. It was more just like, can I get a selfie? Can I get a selfie?
I made a point of never getting a selfie. I have a picture actually of the night you and I met.
Oh, okay. At that
there was
that
a roast. Okay, so can we talk about this roast for a second?
It's so good.
Was it a roast of him or a roast of Guy Fieri? Because it was both.
Yeah, it was meant to be a roast of him, but I think
for charity. I will say this was for a huge charity.
Yeah,
thing.
Was it City Harvest or?
I think so.
Okay.
It was some very good thing. Rachel Ray was there.
Yep.
Guy Fieri,
Mario Batali.
Oh God, yeah, bunch of comedians.
Yeah, well, that was the great thing, and so smart on whoever part organized it is they brought in these like really good New York comedians. Because chefs are funny, we know this, but like. It was such the level of comedy was it was like Gilbert Gottfried and Artie Lang and Jim Norton and just like really people and Bonnie McFarlane she
was incredible. She blew me away. She just zeroed in on everything about everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think Guy got it the worst.
Yeah.
And he was a great sport. He was a tremendous sport, I felt.
He just got a star on the Walk of Fame.
I saw that.
And like a kiss on the cheek from Matthew McConaughey.
Who doesn't want that?
I mean, yeah. Congrats, man.
Yeah. But I met you that night. Just for a backup, you and I have talked about this on the air before, but when Tony I met, it was not under great circumstances. He had written something. I was on the James Beard Journalism Committee, and he had written something. He was still working at Travel Channel, and had written something on his blog about his problems with the awards and how it was a goat rodeo and how basically all food journalists were grifters, and I took tremendous exception with this. And he was saying that I was like, you're damning Jonathan Gold and like sort of all of these other incredible journalists, like in the same breath as like a few notorious grifters and stuff, and what the hell. And I was sort of pleased with myself because I had done the whole thing as a giant elaborate golden shower joke. And I woke up the next morning and he was laying into me on Twitter. And I was responding under like the CNN Etocracy account. And we were going back and forth. He's trying to rope other people into the argument, rope in Mario. Mario was kind of like, I'm staying out of this. And, we're going at it. And I got a frantic call from CNN PR saying, you have to stop. You have to stop now. I got in trouble at work. I had to be spoken to about the official social media thing. I didn't know at the time that he was coming to CNN. And so that was the thing, because, he could turn on a dime. But the thing is, we had enough mutual friends who I think Eddie Wong stepped in, I think maybe Doug Quint, and said like, y'all are on the same side and you just don't know it. So that particular night, I was having to interview people on the red carpet, and I was scared to death. Wow. That and he came along, and as you know, very tall person. And I interviewed him, and then he sort of leaned into me and said, "We're going to be friends." And I said, "Okay." And you were there. We all went to the big gay ice cream truck.
That's right. Afterward,
at the end of it, and that was. That was
the beginning.
So I got to meet you then, and then would encounter you at parties throughout the year. Apparently, you were at a party at my house.
Yes,
and I was unaware of this.
Back in my drinking days, this was like a Kentucky Derby party.
Yes, we used to throw this huge party every year.
And I had already been to a previous Kentucky Derby party where I availed myself of many cocktails, and then came to your house, and then was. I don't know, shy. I guess shy. I could, I feel like I'm pretty good at like sensing other people's energy or whatever. And I was like, this woman who I only met once before has a house full of people. She's cooking, she's hosting. I am not going to. It's sort of what you're saying about Tony. Like, I'm not going to like steal her energy. And also like I am. For some reason, there's nothing more terrifying in the world to me than like an awkward conversation that I can't gracefully get out of, or there isn't like some sort of hard stop that's outside of me.
It's so hard.
I was drunk. And so I remember sitting in the backyard talking to Allison Robicelli and Dana Cowan. And that's when I met my now podcast partner, Chris, for the first time. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I fully processed that is the first time you met each other. And Chris was there, and he was nervous about meeting Pete Wells because he had taunted him on Twitter many times.
Did they ever meet?
They did, and it was fine.
So funny. People think Chris is this like terrifying monster based on some of his Twitter activity, and then he's just like
shit food blogger is his name on, which stands for shit food bloggers say, because it started out he was a food blogger.
That's right. I
hadn't realized that was, or maybe you had told me that and it sort of funneled away somewhere. I didn't realize that was where the magic happened, was in my backyard.
Yeah, I mean, it was brief. I was drunk, and I was just like, I think I said, "You complete me" to him, and then I was mortified. But yeah, that's where, and actually, you're saying about Tony and your sort of early Twitter interactions. That's how I first started talking to Chris online, is because Tony had taken exception with some things that he was saying about, I think, Jose Andres. And, Tony was an incredibly loyal friend.
Once he's on your side, he's on your side.
Yeah. And he was a fan of what Chris did. I think he loved the shit stirring.
Yeah.
But then when he came for somebody that was in Tony's, on Tony's team, he was like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And sort of, gave him some shit about that. And to the point where I then reached out to Chris, who I thought was a woman, an unemployed woman living in like somebody's basement.
As a lot of people.
Yeah. And I was like, I saw what happened. I hope you're okay,
Yeah.
And we began this correspondence. And it took me a while to realize like, oh, he's actually like a functioning adult with a job and a family.
Plays a character.
Yeah, he was playing this character that was like kind of tragic and, insane. So
with the dead daughter.
Lemonade.
Yeah. Lemonade.
Which I asked him about that one time, and he explained to me that it was that there was this phenomenon among food bloggers that they would sort of use their children shamelessly to forward whatever narrative they had until suddenly the child became like not useful, and then you would never hear about the child again.
Sort of like the brother on Happy Days, who all of a sudden was gone after the first season.
That's right. Who like went to war or something.
I think so, and never came back.
Yeah, and they never spoke about him. Oh my God,
but we're speaking about you now, Chuck.
Yes.
We miss you. We think about you.
Wow, that's a real.
It's real.
We just lost all of our millennial listeners.
Oh, sorry, millennials.
Happy Days. That's like one of the first TV shows I remember watching as a real little kid.
Yeah, TV, it's a funny thing. And now we have podcasts, and now we're all walking around with people's voices in our head. And people have your voice in their head. Tony was your producer.
Yes. Which, I mean, was he in there on the soundboards? Was he
mixing with
doing editing? Not so much. But he really generously and totally, to my surprise, when he heard that we wanted to do a podcast, I think I had mentioned it to our mutual agent, and he came to me and said, I heard you want to do a podcast, whatever you need me to do, if there's something I can do, clearly that's not like, huge suck on my time, but if there's a way that I can be useful to you, please let me know, because I would love to get involved. And I was like, are you sure? And then he said this thing that always makes me laugh when I think about it now, because it was so uplifting at the time, but now I'm just like, wow, that did not bear out, which was, he said, you're going to make a ton of money on this thing. He was like, do you know how much money Joe Rogan makes on his podcast? Which I was like, oh yeah, but as it turns out, I am not Joe Rogan.
You're my Joe Rogan.
Well, thank you. I mean, God bless Joe Rogan, but I've never had a syndicated television show, and I'm just not Joe Rogan. So even with Tony's name attached, so we decided to make him our executive producer. And he did, in fact, so we would record with him for maybe 45 minutes to an hour at a time, and then we would cut up those segments and attach one to each episode. And even with his name attached, and even with him on every episode, we have had to hand sell every person that listens, and it's just, the market is so saturated. So, but it was, what a wonderful thing, and totally generous and unselfish of him just to say, like, I want to do this. This guy did not have a lot of free time.
I would imagine. No. And you, if it's okay to talk about this, you did an episode 3 days after his death, and it's raw, and it's angry, and it's all of the things. And I was so grateful that you did that, because I remember you were one of the first people I reached out to. The day that I found out, I mean, you probably found out just a little bit before the rest of us. I woke up, my phone was exploding, and I remember I screamed, and my husband had just left, and I called him back, and he said, do you need me to stay? And I'm like, no. And I let myself break down briefly, because then I knew that I was in a unique position that day, because I already had established, a couple of years old, 2.5-year-old at that time, project about chefs and mental health. And this is, not to speculate anything about him or that, but I knew that there would be a ripple effect in the community, because, I had originally started the project because a couple of chefs killed themselves, several years ago. And I realized that there was this monstrous crisis in the industry. And I thought, like, okay. And I had a Facebook group that I had started the year before on there. And all of a sudden I noticed there are all these members coming in there and stuff. And I thought, like, okay, I have to lock my feelings in a lockbox. I wasn't working at Food One yet, but they knew that I knew him and that I was the person on staff who probably knew him better than anybody else on staff. And so I had to write a piece, but then do like 7, 8, like TV and radio things throughout the day. And I just had to lock my shit down tight and not let it go. And I held on to it for months and put it away and stuff. But, you know, the fact that you were able to go on and articulate what you were feeling at the time is a tremendous generosity thing that you did. I didn't know what to do for you, so I think I sent you a note and some Sharpies.
Yes, yeah, and some candy. Yeah, the Sharpies, it's like, yeah, who doesn't need fresh Sharpies in their lives? And I had actually just moved into a new apartment, so it was perfect.
Because you were going through some shit already.
Yeah, so about a month before Tony died, my husband and I split up. And
girl.
yeah. So that was tumultuous in its own way, certainly. And, you know, we have a son. And so I was sort of handling all of the logistics and all of everything that goes along with that life change. And I remember the night before Tony died saying to a friend on the phone, you know, I was in my new place and I was starting to get furniture. And I said, you know, I feel like, okay, it's been a really awful month, but things are starting to feel a little less like I'm not on like emergency level 10 every second of the day. Like I can breathe, I can sleep. I think I'm going to eat some dinner. You know, like things are starting to feel.
So you're a person who takes care of a lot of people. You and I have talked about, you know, care and feeding of difficult men.
In
various ways.
Yeah. It was a strange thing, you know, to leave the home that I was in with my husband and my son and to not have that. You know, I remember as I was kind of on my way out and I was like, how do I still like, you know, who am I? Like, what's my purpose if I'm not like constantly, you know, thinking about the next meal for 3 people and laundry and all of the sort of just the stuff of taking care of a family, a small family, but a family nonetheless.
With a cat with diarrhea.
And so, you know, there was caretaking involved with my job with Tony. I mean, it was more just like keeping all of the details of a life organized and accessible and, you know, transparent to everyone that was in the circle. So to lose the family life that I had known for 10 years, and then a month later to lose that person who I have said this before, that, you know, Tony was kind of my organizing principle. You know, it was like that was who I felt most accountable to outside of my son. You know, just sort of how I structured my days, the decisions I made, everything. You know, Tony was sort of the center of a lot of people's universe.
It's a lot of gravity.
Yeah. So a few days after he died, right after he died, I think Chris said, let's record. Let's just see what happens. If it's too painful, we won't do it, but let's just get in the studio and see what happens. And it can be as long or short as you want, because I worry that if we don't do it now, we may not do it. And I want to keep doing it. And I got to say, this podcast, I mean, it, like I said, I have not made a dime on it. It's, but it's absolutely a labor of love. And it's something that's definitely, you know, buoyed me for the past year, just the fun and silliness and ridiculousness of it. And also a space to talk about, you know, some more kind of serious things.
Yeah, I've seen that space more and more into, you know, you talked about sobriety on it. 'Cause I remember you had told me, like when you stopped drinking, you told me, and I remember being at a party with you. We were sort of the post James Beard party, like the last Lucky Peach party, and sort of trying to figure out, like, you know, how to be, because it's a different social negotiation. Yeah. When, you know, that party was notoriously chaotic. And
was that the one at the park?
Yes. Yeah. Which is weird because it's sort of decorated like you're outside, but you're inside at the same time. And I think I wasn't drinking right then too, because I was just getting diagnosed then with, you know, various gut things and endometriosis, and I was on medication and trying to figure out what the hell about my diet. So I had actually just that day gotten some word about like what my gut condition was and what I could and couldn't do. And I was just in a sort of tailspin. So it was kind of nice to have, so I remember we were on a quest to find water.
Yes. A scarce resource in those situations.
Yeah. Luckily more and more so I've any event that I'm involved in, I make sure that there's water, there's non-alcoholic stuff, there's space to, be a sober human being. So I just for me, it's medical, like sort of going in and out of drinking just because like for gut stuff for me. But so you had made the decision at that point, and then you've, sort of, as we were saying, like some programming around it.
Yep. I decided to quit drinking in March of 2017. And I don't think I was really talking about this at the time, but I can say now that I was still smoking a ton of pot. It was like one thing at a time, know, and that was the way that I needed to do it, because I was just, really self-medicating a lot. And, so I thought, well, let me start with drinking. And that made a huge difference, positive difference in my life. And I knew at some point I probably should stop smoking pot too, but that was just my first love. And like, I just
a long-term relationship.
Yeah. And it's, we're in this funny place now where, it's becoming more and more legal in more states.
I just started.
Congrats.
Not even smoking. Well, I have a medical card. So I actually like legit have a card from the state, and it's for pain and stuff. And it's never gotten me like high or anything like that. But yeah, it is a funny space.
Yeah.
And everybody's got different relationships with it.
Yeah, it's if it's like anything, if you can use it responsibly, if you can use it without abusing it and it doesn't cause harm to you, like great, go for it. And I know it's got a lot of amazing benefits. For me, it made it it had made it harder in a way, because it's like, well, it's it's socially acceptable and more so, and I can go to California.
Have to smell anymore.
Yeah, but I knew deep down that I was abusing it, just like I was abusing alcohol. Now the side effects are not the same, and I could maintain better, and it was it wasn't the same totally destructive force that alcohol had become, but at the same time it was not helping me get my work done, or be a good parent, or even really deal with all of the emotional upheaval of the last year. Over the summer I was like, I'm just, I just checked out for the whole summer pretty much.
I think that's entirely understandable. And I know that especially when somebody dies by suicide, it comes in waves.
Yep, absolutely.
I've lost friends. I've lost very dear friends that way. I've had friends who have, I'm just going to, by the way, shout out, if this is too hard for people to listen to, whatever, check out Fast Forward. Do whatever. We can have it in the episode notes. Also, 741-741. You can text it 24/7, and there's somebody there who will listen to if you are struggling with thoughts of self-harm or whatever it happens to be. It's crisis text line, and it's really, really awesome. But yeah, it comes in way, and you never know. When those are going to hit. I know for me, I for this in particular, I'm much outer circle than you. You're much further into it, but I locked it for months, and it was real detrimental to me. I spiraled kind of because I ended up going around the country for several weeks talking to chefs in small locked rooms about suicide, and just sort of locked it back myself and didn't deal with my own stuff. And I sort of did the opposite of the checkout, which was not good. So what did summer look like for you?
Just a blur of, I had a lot of anxiety for any number of reasons. I knew that at some point my job was going to end. It ostensibly ended the day that Tony died.
You work for a person.
But I had a few months of sort of, severance and health insurance, and, to sort of figure out the next step. And then I had this tremendous anxiety about how I was going to finish this travel book. As we worked together on the cookbook, I was expecting it to be the same with the travel book, where there would be a lot of, passing something back and forth, and, writing something and getting his input and refinement on the original blueprint. So, it was like, how am I going to am I going to finish this book? And I just got my advance and I don't want to give it back because now I'm, a single mom, like holding up my own household. So now not only do I not have, I'm about to lose my steady income and my health insurance, but I also have to write this book.
Wow.
And then sort of the anxiety of not doing it every day, of just not being able to sit down and do it. And it was like somebody had said to me early on, after Tony died, somebody from the sort of inner circle, such as it is, said, well, my advice to you is to just get busy right away, which I think would work for some people. Yeah, for me, it was not something that I was able to do. But I know in part it was because I was I would get up and I would have breakfast and then I'd be like, well, time to hit the weed pen, and then it doesn't.
Yeah.
I needed some numbing, and that's what it was giving me. But at some point, it was not serving me, And I was a child, who had started to connect the dots. Like, you can't walk around anywhere in New York City and not smell weed at this point, And he's absolutely a smart kid, so it was like, at some point he's going to realize, the smell in my room and the smell on the street is the same thing. So yeah, my summer was just, it was a blur. I did get to go to Paris with a friend for a week, and that was like a wonderful escape. And I was researching the book. The only thing I really could do reliably was travel. I kept trying to sort of run away. I was like, well, if I'm not in my home and I'm not in my space, then I'm at least, and then I'm like working because I'm research. I would go to some of the places that are going to be in the book and revisit some of the things that Tony did, which was surprisingly less painful than like the things that you would think would be painful. Like some people would be like, oh, I hate to bring it up, or it's like. Yeah. There's this misconception that if somebody brings up the name of the person who has died or something about it, that it's going to remind you and open up a fresh wound. And it's like that wound is open. There's I haven't forgotten about it because nobody has said his name in 5 minutes.
Right. The person is present as hell.
Yeah.
I liked it. Like when the first friend of mine who died by suicide, Dave, he had tried before. He was one of my best friends in college, and luckily his girlfriend at the time found him. And then this next time, it finished him, and people were tiptoeing around me. And because I wasn't around people who knew him anymore, because I'd graduated college. He had, he was depressed and drank a lot, and so it had taken him a while longer to be in college. And so I had gone away, and I was around people who didn't know him, and so I was craving mention of him. My friends around me did warn me if there was like suicide in a movie or something like that. They would kind of pre-screen everything for me, especially if the methodology matched up and and all that, and because they were looking out for me there. But I craved other people's stories. I was in a lot of touch with our group from college, but I know it's a different thing for you because this had to be such a strange thing for you and for all the people sort of in the center, because he had this incredible ability to make everybody feel like they knew him. Like very few people in the world in possession of that kind of thing, where, I was talking with a lot of chefs who were saying like, I didn't know him, but I felt like I did, but you did. Yeah. And you get mad. What is the feeling?
Yeah. I knew him, and then I have realized through the process of talking to the other people in his life and doing interviews for this other book, the Oral Biography Project, that you can never it's sort of like something that he would talk about a lot. Like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, Yeah. So every single person I've spoken to, some of whom I worked with, for years, I've learned some new facet of Tony or some story. But I knew him to an extent, and I knew where he was every day, and I knew a lot about him, but certainly not everything. He was a very, very private person in a lot of ways. So, Yeah, it's a really, I've never lost anybody to suicide before. There was a girl I knew that I was friendly with in college, but I wasn't close with her, and it was very sad. But this was certainly the closest of that type of death. I mean, there's, like you said, there's sort of a range of emotions, and they come in waves. There's certainly some anger. There's a lot of what I found helpful, and I think some of the people around me felt the same way, was for the first few months just kind of telling each other sometimes the same stories over and over again, or the same sort of accounts of the days and weeks leading up to it, and just sort of getting a sense of where he was. And I think what we were trying to do, there's such a sense of there can be such a misplaced sense of guilt or of regret at things not said, or actions not taken. So I think there's a sense of trying to put the pieces together and figure out a way in which to really come to understand that this was one person's decision. This was an adult making a decision about their life. And as much as it hurts, and as much as it makes us angry, and as much as it makes us feel that we have failed, that it's not really the case, that all of us that knew him, loved him as best as we could, supported him the ways in which we could, that we knew how, that we were allowed to. And ultimately, this was a decision that he made, and that it wasn't because this person didn't say that, or this person wasn't there, or, there were some of his closest friends that were with him. And I think it's, there's degrees of more or less, sense of, I feel lucky in a sense. I was isolated by a continent, you know, and I did not have the kind of relationship with Tony where I would expect him to call me in the middle of the night and say, I'm having a hard time. So I if I can call myself lucky, I was kind of relieved of that burden of like, if only, but I still, it didn't stop me from going back over timelines and talking to all the other people, and what could have, should have, would have, because I think that's just part of the process of trying to accept what has happened. I would end a lot of conversations saying like, well, it doesn't fucking matter because he's dead anyway, know, which
the funny is like, I know other people who are close to him, and there was that sort of immediate, like, hard thing, but you see, it's self-preservation. Mm-hmm. It's one, particular person, like in those first few days was, either numb or flip or whatever. And I thought like, let's see where that goes. And, and the thing is, like, everybody reacts how they need to right then. And then months later, I saw the sinking in of that and the processing, and like the God damn it. And sometimes it's years later. Sometimes it's, right. There's no right reaction. And it's so complicated. And I will say there's no one thing anybody can say that's going to change it. No magic thing, no magic, number. There's just, it's a decision that happens and is irrevocable and, irrevocable, whatever it is. And the thing is, no one person's going to be able to, flip that. And I understand that guilt from having, lost people that way. And you can internalize it. I think the way I sort of dealt with things, and I was thinking like, oh, it was not a dire DM. The last exchange with him was he was super angry about not anything I did, but there was some reporting around a bad man, and he was trying to get me to like go bulldog after that, and I said like, I love you, I'm not your hench girl.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. He was trying to bait me, and I like reached out to another friend. I'm like, Tony in your DMs too. And she was like, yeah. But I was I was like, you got to work that one out on your own, hun. Like, because it's I'm like, I see that you have all this anger that is placed in in this one particular place, because he was super vocal at the end about a whole lot of stuff, and I was thinking like, I'm not being I'm not going on the attack for you as much as I adore you. But I think he respected the boundary.
Yeah but it's not easy.
But the thing, like, nothing, there's no magic thing in there. There's nothing that and that's sort of when some of the sadness sets in, because you think like, what haven't I done? What have I done? And it's hard to accept the futility of some things.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I've been seeing the same therapist for 20 years now.
Yay, therapy. It's a really good shit.
Yeah. So I used to go every other week just because it's expensive. And then once my marriage fell apart, I started seeing her every week. And then that actually hasn't changed, although it's got to, because it's very expensive.
It's really expensive.
But so I can't say enough good about having a therapist every week. And just by terrible coincidence, she had her own unexpected loss at the same time, like a few weeks before Tony died. So it's really enhanced our therapeutic relationship because we're in some ways going through a similar feeling of loss and disconnection. And so that's been great. So, I grew up sort of in a family that was suspicious of therapy, and it just wasn't something that
self-care
people
not
did.
at the forefront necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just a combination of culture, of place, of time, where it was extremely, if somebody was in therapy, it was because they had a real bad problem,
Right.
And I also grew up in a town where like you couldn't conceive of that anybody would be gay, and that of course turned out to be not true. Upstate New York, excuse me, outside of Syracuse, a small village called Chittenango. And so again, it was like time, culture, and place where, you didn't go to therapy. Everybody was straight. All of these sort of like myths that we know now not to be true. Right. But like I said, I've been in therapy for 20 years, and if you can figure out a way to afford it, or if you can, get yourself, I think it can be so tremendously helpful.
I think I'm at 32 years on and off of therapy, but I will honestly say it saved my life. When I was 14 and feeling suicidal, I was super depressed, and my parents got me into therapy, and it absolutely saved my life. And it's work. It's constant work to be okay. And I feel like in the food community, in the chef community, particularly, I'd started this project, Chefs with Issues, January 1st, 2016, because there had been some deaths, including Hamaral Kantu, in Chicago. That was very sudden and surprising to a lot of people. And then there are some that are off the record. It happens a lot. It happens a lot in the community, and people don't talk about it, and they don't call it suicide, and and it just doesn't get reported. But I remember the month after I started this, there were 3 prominent ones. I started in February 2016, 3 in a month, and but I couldn't necessarily get people to talk about. Some people were really ready to talk about mental health. Some people were like, hell yeah, let's go. And some people were like, no. So in August of 2016, I gave a keynote at Mad Symposium in Copenhagen, and I got up. This was the scariest thing I'd done. And I got up in front of several hundred of the most prominent chefs in the world at Rene Redzepi's conference, and said like, people are dying and people are suffering, and we have to talk about this. And it was such a split reaction. And then we had breakout sessions after that, and I couldn't believe I was sitting in a tent with like 80 like hardcore, like well-known chefs from around the world wanting to talk about it. And we had a breakout the next day too. And then, finding out that there were other people who were very much opposed to it. Like, why are you trying to make us wusses? Why are you trying to just shut up and cook? Why are you trying to destroy culture? And my take was always like, I'm not telling you have to do anything. I'm just saying there's help here if you need it. And I went back and spoke this last summer. And it was, not on the main stage, but I did 2 breakout sessions. Not a single person argued with the fact since June 8th of this last year. Not a single person has argued that this is something that we have to talk about. The membership of the Facebook group that morning was 828 people. It's very close to 3,000 now, and much of that growth happened in the month after. The conversation opened up. The ripples also opened up, because I saw a lot of people thinking like, well, if he wasn't happy being alive. What the hell here? And so, we've had a lot of conversations. Like, luckily, the community takes care of its own in some ways that maybe it didn't before.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Yeah. It's a really hard. I think it's a hard thing for people to face in this industry because it's like already there's, the talk immediately goes to like, well, our margins are low. How can we take care of, taking care of people involves money, and we're already, scrambling for the last dollar. And, there's, I spoke about this at Women Chefs and Restaurateurs last month.
A friend of mine was in the audience and said it was incredible. I think you've spoken a couple of times recently. You spoke at something in New York.
I spoke at Bitten last fall.
Okay, yeah, that had a huge effect on a friend of mine who was absolutely just blown away and stuff. So, people, when we talk, people are really, really listening when you talk. You're a very powerful and effective speaker.
Thank you.
And I've
tell that to my son.
Yeah, I'll tell your son. I'll tell your agent. I'll tell anyone you need. But yeah, what you out there having these conversations, it matters a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I want to be very careful not to speak for Tony,
absolutely,
or to speculate too much. But just the fact that his death was this kind of organizing catalyst to get people to sort of face it. But I think it's like anything else that's like a scary reality. It's like, I think I knew deep down that I had a problem with alcohol for years, but it's like, well, I'm just gonna talk about it, So I think it's if it's an industry-wide problem and there's something inherent to the way that we're doing business that's really causing people to have mental health problems or to exacerbate or at least not address.
Not go to therapy because then you're, put your head down and cook.
Yeah, or you can't afford it or you don't have time.
Yeah, there's some systemic stuff. Because, people don't have any money to deal with this.
So I think it's just it's easier. It makes people angry because they're afraid. And that was kind of the key part of my lecture. It wasn't a lecture. My talk at Women's Chefs and Restaurateurs was, and I've really realized this in myself, is that a lot of anger is just like sublimated fear.
People are terrified. People are absolutely like it's. David Chang did a podcast pretty soon after, and he's been on this podcast. And I saw him go from that mad in 2016. Like, he was talking to me about some stuff, but then we did a podcast with Daniel Patterson where Daniel was super open about stuff and David just yelled at him. And we actually erased the podcast because Daniel asked him to ask the producer to erase it. But David he did a podcast pretty soon after where he was just like, shit, I should have been talking about this. And he's, since come to me and said like, hey, I should have been talking. And I'm like, you weren't ready. So it manifested in, and I can say this stuff openly because he talked really openly on this podcast about it. Like, so he would just yell at people and be angry because he was scared of his own head. And, having stuff locked in your head is hard shit.
I realized that the ways in which I get angry, like at my son in particular, is, if I'm angry about something, it's because, and not so much anymore because he's 10 and he's a little more, but when he was like a little kid, I would get angry because he would, run into the street or, do something that was putting at him in danger. So it's like, it's easy to see that it's like, I feel afraid and that's making me so uncomfortable that it makes me angry, and I think that is just, if we can sort of keep that in mind, and it's like, all right, well then what do we do about to give people a better sense of security in this business and make them feel less afraid. And I talked about Kelly Fields at
I love her so
at Willa Jean in New Orleans. And she's not the only one, but she's someone that I interviewed for the James Beard publications about her employee assistance program.
Oh, and your writing there is wonderful too. So if you go to like James Beard, it's the blog there.
That was the first I had, and I think, I'm not in the industry anymore, so I don't always know exactly what's going on, but to hear about that her employees have health insurance, but they also have this employee assistance program that's where they can call, they have numbers they can call for various crises and get referrals to mental health or legal, advice or, just various life crisis stuff.
Well, and she had to set that up in the wake of some stuff in that particular empire and offer care to people. So for people who don't have the background on it, Restaurant with John Besh, who was accused of a whole lot of misconduct and various other bad behaviors. So they had to, really scramble into place and get, HR in place and safe communication channels. Because I think that's the thing that happens. People don't feel safe in a restaurant especially if it's a small business, like going right to the owner of it. Right. There's got to be a safe way to report things. And taking care. So Kelly's done some really, and so we actually recorded a podcast with her, which
great.
We will release at some point. And talking about like, okay, figure out like what was wrong with the system and trying to course correct for that and really make sure that people felt safe and open and all that.
So, apart from that, I think, and then money obviously is if you feel fearful because you don't, am I going to be able to pay my rent, or, I'm not saving anything for retirement, or how am I going to pay my taxes? All of these things. So I don't know. I mean, it's, it becomes a global issue. It's like, well, there's all this wealth in the world, and how is it that, more and more of us are feeling financially insecure? I mean, these are problems that I am not equipped to solve, but I think about them.
Laurie, actually.
Yes. Fix it. I'm going to solve wealth inequality and worldwide. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is really, except that just these small things, and the chefs that are able to change over to a tip included model, and so that their cooks are making a salary that's commensurate with what the front of the house is making. I mean, I know it's a very difficult thing. I have Amanda Cohen, who I also shouted out at WCR, has committed to it. She's doing it.
She's had it baked in since the beginning. Like the way that she set up Dirt Candy was really with her people in mind in a deeply meaningful way.
Yeah. And that, and then you're retaining people. I mean, I'm not a restaurant operator, and I know that the challenges are many. I'm close with a chef who runs a big kitchen in New York, and we talk all the time about just, he'll tell me a story about, one personnel issue or one supply issue, and it sounds incredibly stressful. And he's like, well, that's 1% of my day, it's just a constant, like, who's showing up to work? Are they drunk? Did the carrots come in? Now this sink is leaking. I mean, not that people, obviously if you know, but the level of stress is, I'm somebody who works from home. I feel very lucky, to not have to, and I still feel scared a lot of the time and insecure and anxious about the future. So,
you and I have bonded over anxiety before. I think I sent you one of the first copies of my book about anxiety, along with a squishy bunny.
Yes.
So the thing with the squishy bunny, so there's a rabbit on the cover of my book, and the marketing team they were saying, what is the little thing we can send out to people with it? And they originally wanted a pill bottle with the candy inside.
What?
And I said, did you not read the chapter where going off medication very nearly killed me? And I said, how about a stress toy? Because I really love stress toys, and got them to make a squishy little bunny thing. I've spent a lot of time squishing little things over the last year. So after it happened, actually the next day I had to go to Charleston for the FAB conference, which is really fantastic.
Now, what is that?
Food and beverage. It turns out it's, and this woman, Randy Weinstein, runs it. It's all women, all different levels of the industry get together, and there are panel discussions, and it's just, it's just a really, really smart, thoughtful conference. And I was on several panels about self-care where I was thinking, and I flat out said, like, I suck at it. I have no idea how to do this. I'm a fraud up here. Luckily, there were a lot of other people up there who were saying, like, I don't really know how to do it too, but let's just have really honest conversations about it. And I needed, and I was around community of people. But right as I was there, I got a call from my now boss here at Food and Wine, who said, can you go to Aspen? Because it was a week after. And actually the week before I had been in Atlanta And we had closed door sessions for people in the restaurant industry just to talk through mental health stuff. Kim Severson ran one panel about recovery, and I ran one about mental health. And it's amazing. And I think it's probably okay to say this, like, Seamus Mullen, who's been a guest on this podcast, was so open and fantastic about everything he's gone through. So this was the week before. And then right after, went to that, and then I went to Aspen, and we were thinking, like, what do we do? Like, what is the thing to do? And sort of came up with a model of, like, let's just get people together to talk. So I thought, who do I really trust to be part of this, to kind of guide a conversation with me? Andrew Zimmern, who has been an absolute rock for me and for my mental health. Hugh Atchison, same. I can text him whenever, and he is there. And Jen Heidegger Kendrick, who runs the Giving Kitchen.
Okay.
And she's been through loss and stuff, from illness, and we just kind of put out the word to the people who in the industry who we knew were going to be there. Found a restaurant that was not open yet, and got a bunch of boxes of tissues and had people just talk. And it was people at all levels of the industry, and just had an open conversation about it. And I think the thing that came out of that was that people brought it back to their communities, whatever city they were in, and had conversations from there. And then I traveled for the next few weeks. I was booked to go to different cities anyway, and then other people were booking me to speak just about mental health stuff after this. Because again, can't say this enough, don't want to speculate about the whys, the wherefores, or whatever, because it's somebody else's head, somebody else's life, and all that stuff, and it does no good. It does zero good to speculate. But it set up a model where I would go to other cities and just sort of put out the word. Sometimes it was in front of a bigger audience, sometimes it was closed door, and just be like, whoever wants to talk. Actually, the night of, I already had dinner planned with the people from Olympia Provisions, Eli Cairo, who I've known, and I, went through, did all these like 7 or 8 interviews and wrote a story and stuff, and I was like, and ended up having dinner with him, and he said, oh, if you're ever in Portland, we can get people together there. And as it turned out, I was going to Portland in a few weeks. So yeah, I just went through sort of a few weeks of doing that. But you were saying you traveled to get away?
Yeah.
And I traveled, and I got too far into my own head.
Yeah.
But I ended up going on medication at the end of the summer, which was a great thing for my head. And I also, I think I've talked about this before, but I screamed. I kept making jokes about getting in my car and screaming. And it was throughout the Brett Kavanaugh hearings where every woman I knew wanted to scream. And I finally, Douglas and I have this church upstate, this deconsecrated church with great acoustics. And I said, it's time. And he took the dogs out, and I cranked up some music, and I screamed from the bottom of my stomach, and I screamed for Tony. And I screamed until I almost threw up on the carpet. And then my entire body rebooted, in my head, my body, everything. And I was able to sort of move forward and take care of myself.
Wow.
How have you taken care of yourself? What is your thing? Like, I know you're going through recovery, going through new life.
I mean, I was so grateful that I was already not drinking when this happened.
That was in
because
place.
I feel like had I been, I saw some of the people around me were drinking, and it's just that's for them to deal. But for me, I was glad that I didn't have that to turn to. So like I said, weekly therapy. I had been on antidepressants, and I just continued to do that and continue to do so. At some point, I realized that I had to, the only way I was going to feel better about this work was to actually start it. And one of the ways I needed to be able to truly start it and commit to it was to quit smoking pot. But if I'm being very honest, what really got me to quit smoking pot was I needed to get a life insurance policy as a condition of my divorce. And I went to speak with the agent, and, was very transparent about my situation and that I smoke pot. And he said, well, if they're going to do a blood test and a physical, and if it comes out that you've got THC in your blood, then you're going to be charged the same rate as a cigarette smoker. And it's significantly more expensive. And this is coming out of my own pocket. So it really came down to like, I want to save money.
Economics.
Yeah.
Sure. Good reason as any.
I mean, I think I was really primed to quit, but I needed some external impetus.
You knew, sometimes that other excuse, and you can put it on. I'm doing it for my kids.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I'll just, I'll quit for 3 weeks. I'll have the physical, and then maybe I'll see how I feel. And like right away, I was like, oh, yes, this is what I needed. This is what I've needed to do for a while.
What does it feel like? Like is it a veil lifting? Like, what's the physicality of it?
It just, I mean, I don't know that I felt, honestly, it's that I wasn't, so tired, it was something that would just make me tired. I mean, that's not a surprise really, but my energy levels were more consistent throughout the day. And, like sort of counterintuitively, this was a drug that I was using, that I thought, to manage my anxiety. And once I stopped using it, I became much less anxious.
It's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I had just turned a corner where it was like, it was having the opposite effect that I intended it to have. So
that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So taking that out of the equation really just like, I felt on so much more of an even keel, and I didn't feel guilty, like I didn't have to feel like, oh, what a fucking loser I am. It's 2 p.m. and I'm stoned, and now I'm like useless, and I'm going to go eat a bag of chips, So, and then I, just like cardiovascularly, I also, this time last year, I was smoking cigarettes, which, I mean.
Oh, that's a huge thing to give up, too.
I mean, it's something that I had gone in and out of. And, as my stress levels ramped up with the divorce and Tony's death, I was just like all in, and then it's like, this is so fucking stupid and gross. And, but it's like, I just, whatever. If you had told me last year at this time that I would not be smoking cigarettes, nor would I even be chewing the nicotine gum, which was something I also was big into, and I wouldn't be smoking pot, I'd be like, you're crazy. But so. Again,
it's been a bitch of a year.
It's been a bitch of a year, yeah. So, but
title of your memoir.
And then, there are a lot of voices in the 12-step rooms. I would hear people say things about, I'm not drinking, but I'm still smoking pot, or I'm really mad because I'm not drinking and my partner's not drinking, but he's still smoking pot. Or, there was a lot of disparagement or a lot of questioning around, is it or is it not okay to smoke pot or to do these other drugs if we have quit drinking? And I would always be kind of defensive. I would never talk about it. I would never admit to my own pot smoking in the rooms. But, it definitely stuck with me. I can think of the faces of the people that said specific things about pot, because I was like, I didn't want to hear that, even though I knew it to be something I would have to sort of reckon with. So the having already being on a path of recovery and then really and getting to go into the rooms and getting to actually truly engage with the program, because I felt I was just kind of circling it for a year and a half or so, because I felt like, well, I'm not being on it. Like I'm not really sober. I'm just not drinking. So I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't start to work the steps. I didn't do any of the things that are suggested as a course of true recovery, really engaging with it, because I felt like, well, I'm not there yet. I'm not ready yet. It still was very helpful to me, but now being all in on it is a whole, and I'm just getting started. I've been working on step 1 for months, and I don't, I'm not sure when I'm going to move to step 2. I'm not in any hurry. And it is, there are so many cliches, and it's so easy to kind of dismiss. And I certainly have rolled my eyes at some of the cliches, but, like they say, it works if you work it. So, and it's not for everybody, and I didn't know if it was for me. And there's more than one way to recover, but for me, it's been a tremendous source of support.
Well, I think it's also, I'm so grateful that you're talking about this, because you don't necessarily, like, outside of rooms, like, hear a lot of women talk about it. It's, and in the food world, there's this sort of great arc of redemption of all, like, hedonists, like, doing this, but you don't hear about the women, and it affects a lot of women, and it probably looks like a different thing in women than it does, and especially since we're leaned on for caretaking in all different kinds of ways, even if we're not parents or whatever it is. And, which is why I'm just extra grateful that especially when you started talking about it on your podcast, because I remember you had told me, and then I sort of figured you were like going along with it and stuff.
Yeah.
But then there was just one particular episode where you were, it was just all in, and I appreciated that so much. And I sort of feel like, if I had a friend who wanted to go into that, like I would have them listen to that episode of it, because you're also funny as hell.
Oh, thank you.
I get, like, with this podcast, it's like this world of characters who they have created, a sort of sleazy man named Kliss. There's the references to going full dinty that actually is a sort of story of depression.
Yeah.
It's
been a nice thing to have that outlet. I think that there's a couple of reasons why people don't talk about it that much, or women don't talk about it. Certainly, I mean, there's the word anonymous is in, many 12-step programs are, so I think sometimes there's a misconception that it means that, that there's a veil of shame or there's a veil of secrecy. And I don't think I think the anonymous part more comes from, what gets said in the room stays in the rooms, and we're not talking about other people's recovery. But I think that anytime that there's more light shed on it. I mean, I myself, before I ever even really considered getting sober, I remember distinctly listening to interviews with other people on Julie Klausner's podcast and certainly on Mark Maron's podcast, and him talking about his own sobriety. And it was just so helpful to hear a funny, creative, flawed person just talk about their experience with it, in a way that wasn't, I mean, I think my understanding of recovery was was wrong. And I thought it was sort of like church and sort of like, it's I've heard somebody say yesterday at a program or at a meeting, it's not a program of don'ts, and so that to understand that it's a suggested course of recovery, and here's things you can do, and it's not about punishment. I grew up Catholic, so there's like
same.
the whole structure of
myself recovering Catholic.
Yeah, of you have done wrong, and here are the things you need to do to make it right. Or
10 Hail Marys, 3 Our Fathers,
and it's not that. I mean, I think that for some people it dovetails nicely with the Catholic faith, but it's certainly not a requirement. And it's not the way. It's not the way that it's administered.
Yeah.
So I'm always happy to talk about it. And talk to people about it. I've had the pleasure of speaking at a couple of meetings where you sort of tell your story, which can be, it's hard. You have to sort of keep yourself from trying to make it too funny, or it's like, it's not about like, let me tell you all the crazy awesome things I did when I was drunk, but sort of your story from what it was like, and then how things have changed, and and I've heard hundreds of other people's stories, and sometimes they are really funny, and that's great too. But what you realize after hearing so many of them is that we're all kind of the same. It's like no addict is so special and unique that their problems can't be addressed if they're willing, by this fellowship. So
what does a good self-care day look like for you? Like, in addition to like going to a meeting, like how do if you're brought up not talking about stuff and maybe not for self-care, and you're doing a project that's got to be pretty emotionally grueling, what are the things you do to take care of yourself?
I'll tell you, this is a perfect question, because I just came off of a couple of really good days where
good. I'm so glad to hear that.
So I have a new project that's not related to Tony, and that's and I was nervous about taking it on because I thought, do I have time to do this one, but also do finish the Tony stuff? And what I realized in starting it is that it feels like I guess it's sort of like, swinging 2 bats in the on-deck circle, or, lifting a bunch of weights and then just lifting up your own arms. It's like, to do this non-Tony related project, it feels incredibly light and joyful and fun, which really what it did is help me realize, like, and acknowledge that the stuff, it is hard. It's hard and heavy to be, co-authoring a book with a ghost, and to be interviewing the people that he was closest to about a man that's no longer with us. And I think just being able to feel that I deserve, whatever it is, the space to see, this is hard emotional work, has been really great in a way that sounds counterintuitive, but it's like, there's a reason why I've felt like, like a rain cloud over my head for the past year, But in terms of a self-care day, I mean, I've had a couple of days where my son was with his dad, and so I was very conscious of not making any plans. And
that feels so good.
So it's just me alone in my apartment. The weather has been beautiful. And I've just, I've given myself a lot of time to write, to work on this other project, which I find very pleasurable. I've been taking naps, and sometimes I feel really guilty about that. But it's like I am at my core, I'm a nap person, and so I'm like, if I'm tired, I will take a nap. I will wake up when I'm done sleeping, and then I will keep working. And so I just had this couple of days of and it's, I know it's an absolute luxury, not everybody gets to have 3 or 4 days over a holiday weekend to just be alone and do their things. But I knew, like, this morning when I woke up, like, I'm ready. Like, my son will come over after school and I'll have him for a few days, and I am ready to, like, be a good parent to him. And I've gotten a ton of sleep, and I got good work done, but I didn't, like, kill myself. I went and I bought a bag of candy and I ate it. I mean, there are times in my life where I've been incredibly neurotic and restrictive around food, for better or worse, and mostly worse, even though it's like, maybe I think I look good in a photo, but like, what it takes to get there and the amount of like negative self-talk that it takes to get there, is it worth it? I don't know. So I decided yesterday, like, I want some candy. I'm going to go fucking buy it, and I'm going to go eat the whole bag.
Did you say candy?
Why, yes, I did. Oh my God, what? What is?
Would you describe for the audience who is listening what I've just presented you with?
I feel like this is a cubic foot of haichu, individually wrapped haichus.
But it is a piece of art.
God, yes.
If you look at the back, and it's signed on the side. This was actually donated by a coworker who was given this by the Haichu representatives, who I did send your way at one point. So the podcast, the Carb Face podcast, has frequent mentions of Haichu on it as a great snack, and you share candy with your guests. And I think they reached out to me and I said, do you know about this podcast? And you interviewed them. But this appeared on my colleague's desk, and I asked if I could give it to you.
That is outrageous. So it's a plexiglass frame that is stuffed with individually wrapped haichu, sweet and sour, watermelon, lemon, and some other flavor, grapefruit. It's beautiful.
There's a weird print on the back of it too. It's like sort of if you look under the candy.
There's like sort of a water, like a wallpaper of the same.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's signed by the artist, Robin Blair. Amazing.
But I wanted you to have that as a candy fiend.
Thank you. Oh my God.
I don't know if it fits your home decor, or whatever,
does.
but I knew that you had a new apartment.
Yes, and I have mostly bare walls. I just haven't had the headspace to really deal with getting art, and I've just started to buy art. I bought this beautiful painting of a woman with no shirt on, happily eating Cheetos.
That was on your Instagram, and it was really
this young artist, Kat Giordano, based in Massachusetts, and she's doing great work. So, yeah.
And this also, like, to me, I wish it said sweet and bitter on there too, because it also, you're a person who is one of the funniest humans and stuff. But you also have the deepness within, and you've been so kind as to you have an uncanny sense for when I need somebody to reach out and say how you doing, and you've popped into my inbox in some really moments when it really mattered, and I appreciate that so much.
Back at you, man.
So what is the thing that you want people, like a thought you want to put in people's head about Tony that they might not know that?
That's a tough one. I mean, he shared so much of himself, in his writing and on television. I think that, and he people started to call him like the world's most interesting man, or
like the Dos Equis guy.
Yeah, and he himself would say, like, I've got the best job in the world, and my life is amazing. I think, I guess, and I know that there was a sense of, like, if this guy, like you said it, if this guy with this life and this amazing story didn't find life worth living and a world worth sticking around in, like, what is there for me? So I guess I would just ask people to sort of think a little beyond that and just know that, he was a gifted performer, and a gifted storyteller, and that, there were ways in which, that things were not great. And he was a flawed human being. And he also was very transparent about his struggles in some ways, So just to kind of remember that he was a full human being, and that, just because you have a wildly successful television program and 10 million Twitter followers or whatever, if there's some other thing that's fundamentally lacking, if there's a structure that's lacking there, it doesn't matter. So, I don't know. I'm not really summarizing this so eloquently, but just that he was. That there was more to it than just the surface glamour and brilliance. That he was a flawed human being like anyone else.
Yeah, and that is a gift. So there is a question I ask of everybody, because I think it helps to say it out loud. Mm-hmm. You have taken care of so many people, as we have established. What is the selfish thing you want for you?
Oh. What is a selfish thing I want for me?
And this is so if you say it out loud, other people can help you get this thing.
Okay. All right. So we're talking like a career goal or an object, or...
It can be anything.
Anything. Wow. I've always really wanted to, and I haven't quite figured out how to like manifest it. I've thought that a cruise might be like the worst thing in the world. Like I loved David Foster Wallace's supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. And it sort of set my expectation for, okay, well, that's not something I want. But there are these smart cruises, or sort of like, evolved cruises that go to some of the most interesting places in the world. And there's one to the Galapagos. Ooh. And I have always thought, I've tried to figure out for years, like, can I do a story? I don't think the food of the Galapagos is really like the thing, but if I can figure out a way to get myself and maybe my son on one of these Galapagos cruises, that I feel like would be, and I don't know. I mean, and it may be one of those things where I get there and go, oh yeah, no, I do not want to live on a boat. As it turns out, I hate this. But I feel like that's something I've always kind of come back to for years is I want to get myself there.
Dear universe, send Laurie to the Galapagos. So my version here of your lots of likes or sort of questions you do at the end. These are rapid fire. Don't think too hard.
Okay.
What's your comfort food? And you can sip your coffee.
Yeah. I mean, coffee is one of them, but gummy candy.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I sent you some Haribo or something like, yeah. Do you have a particular favorite gummy?
I'm really into the Fizzy Cola, the Haribo Fizzy Cola. But Haichu also makes a Fizzy Cola Haichu that I think is fantastic. And I can take down a bag of those with no trouble at all.
Yeah. Universe also, maybe, if Haichu had a cruise.
A
high cruise.
Oh my God. So many possibilities.
So many. What is the last meal that you had that made you emotional?
Oh. Huh. I was, I had a beautiful meal in Paris with somebody that I'm dating.
Ooh.
That was exactly kind of what we had both wanted for the trip. That was just, it was like sort of a perfect moment of happiness and a high point of the trip. And it was at Brasserie Lip in Paris, where I had never been before. And it was, it was like, Tony would have called it dinosaur era food. That
was the creams and butter and
it was
canals of things.
Yeah, big plate of fries, and I'm not even remembering the specifics of the food itself. Well, it was like choucroute. That's what it was.
Oh yeah.
And it was just and this beautiful snappy service, and just one of those things where you feel like you've traveled back in time, and yet it's very much 2019, and so wonderful that people are still doing things the way that they're doing. And the guy put the fries down, and he said, "Do you want ketchup?" And I said, "No, thank you." And he said, "That's right. You do not want ketchup." Like, he was so thrilled that the dumb American didn't want ketchup for her fries. And yeah, it was a really, really happy time. And just, a great memory.
I'm so glad you got to have that.
Yeah.
That's lovely. What is the last meal that somebody cooked for you in their home?
Oh, gosh, it's been a while, honestly. Like I don't find myself going to people's homes. I can't remember that. Somebody needs to invite me to dinner.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
I honestly feel like it's been months. Is that weird? And now, as soon as I leave, I'm gonna remember, and I'm gonna be like, oh, sorry, so and so, I totally forgot about that thing. But I feel like my memory is a little bit, even though I don't smoke pot anymore, I feel like my memory has become a little bit porous.
Well, I mean, this last year, I'm sure there are pockets and holes in it.
Yeah.
So please, somebody, this is Food and Wine Pro. There are chefs who listen to this, and a goodly amount of them.
Actually, no, I take that back. So it wasn't in my home, but it was in an Airbnb. I had a beautiful risotto cooked for me with chorizo, and then the steamed leaves of kohlrabi that were then pureed with the chorizo broth, and it was fucking delicious.
Who cooked it?
This is my same friend that I went to
you have a
Brasserie
friend.
Lip with. Yeah,
That's nice to have friends.
yes. Yeah,
lovely.
a friend who's a very good cook.
Yay. So. What living musician would you want to? Well, I asked this of chefs, but you're a cookbook writer too, so I will say, what living musician would you want to cook for, and what would you cook for them?
Oh, Nico Case.
Oh, yes.
Whose music I have loved for so long.
Oh, she's so great. And she's great on Twitter, too.
Yes, so funny.
She's so delicious.
And I'm pretty sure she's a vegetarian. If she's not, I apologize. But I if I had to guess, I'd say she's a vegetarian. So I just did this pasta the other day for me and my son, and I loved it. It was lentil pasta because we're not eating gluten right now and gut stuff. And it was, I had leftover riced cauliflower that I mixed up with a beaten egg and put it in with the hot pasta and kind of let the egg cook, and then put nutritional yeast on it. And it sounds so like hippie, whatever.
Nutritional yeast is amazing.
It was delicious. So I felt proud enough of that dish that I would want to serve that to Nico Case.
Oh, dear Nico Case.
Come over.
Yeah. She is phenomenal, and that's an excellent choice.
Thanks.
Last question. You have 5 uninterrupted minutes for self-care. What do you do?
I put on this dumb mask that I have. It's called like temporary lifting mask. So you put it on, and it's a clay mask, and it dries, and then like for a day you look slightly, I don't know what it does really, but it makes me feel good when I do it. And so I would put that mask on and let it dry. And while it dried, I would listen to one of my favorite podcasts, which is called Retail Nightmares.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, so good. These 2 brilliant women in Vancouver have guests on. They talk about retail nightmares or retail dreams. They talk about animals a lot. They're really funny. And I've sort of formed a little friendship with them, although we've never met in person, but we have like a Twitter DM thread going, and we send each other little gifts. And I mean, it feels sort of very young girlish in a way, to have these like little pen pals.
No, I totally have those, and I love it so much.
So I would let the mask dry. I would listen to Retail Nightmares, and then I would rinse it off.
Yeah, I really hope that this next year is filled with joy for you.
Thank you.
And goodness and calmness and good meals with your friend.
Yes, I hope so too.
And other things. And I just can't say enough. Like, thank you for putting it out there and making life a little easier for people, so people don't feel like freaks, so people feel like they're together. And I just thank you, Laurie
Oh my
Woolever.
God, thank you. It's, let me talk about myself for 45 minutes. I'm in.
Well, it's generous and lovely, and people can hear more of you on Carb Face, which is this fantastic podcast that I highly recommend people listen to. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll feel very uncomfortable at various.
Subscribe, 5 stars. Don't listen with your kids.
Yes, very much. Don't listen with your kids. But it's such a great thing. You can find you on socials at Laurie Woolever.
Yep.
And then you've written Appetites, and then you have books coming out.
Yes, it's pretty far in the future to talk about dates or any real specifics, but I have a travel book that should be coming out next year, and the oral biography coming out sometime in the same general time span. Got to be sort of general with
Yeah.
these things, but they are in the works, and hopefully you will enjoy them and learn a little bit more about Tony from them.
Yeah. Laurie, thank you so much for
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you to our producers, Jennifer Martinick and Alicia Cabral. Thanks to Douglas Wagner for our delightful theme song. If you like what you heard, please tell a friend, write a review, or rate us. As you know, that matters. The stars, the ratings. If there's something you would like for us to talk about or a guest you'd like to hear from, please let us know. I'm going to shout out Crisis Text Line one more time. Text 741-741-24/7. Someone will be there to listen. You can find me on Twitter at @KittenWithAWhip, where I am all the dang time. Find out more about the show and catch up on all the episodes at foodandwine.com and Food and Wine's YouTube page. Thank you so much for listening, and take good care of yourself until the next time.